So I'm wondering, we've touched multiple times on the fact that you've been an entrepreneur, and that's really actually what still defines you. And I'm wondering, working with nonprofits, which maybe don't have, especially web entrepreneurship, where you sort of go from ideation to rapid prototyping to the alpha version, beta version, and you just try to get through that pipeline really quickly. And I think that's a very different focus from some nonprofits, which, and especially environmentalism, where the timeline is just completely different. How do you deal with your impatience?
Or how did they deal with it?
Right on. Because I can see myself. I'm very involved with multiple projects, and I love pushing things forward. And I get very impatient. And I've worked for a nonprofit myself, and I clearly know that it's probably not for me before I'm 30, because I'd be too impatient about it. I'd really want to see this thing happen now.
Right. Well, something I said earlier, which is when you're making a grant to a nonprofit, you are making an investment in that nonprofit. You're just recognizing that you're not getting a financial return. Mm. So if you're going to make an investment in a nonprofit, there's a whole decision process that you're going to say, why should it be this nonprofit versus that nonprofit? Within a nonprofit, which activity should I be supporting? I think for Betsy and I, the nonprofits, the large nonprofits that we work with, know what we're all about, and they come up to see us as their venture investors in some ways. And we're very proud of the funding that we have done with the largest nonprofits, but with small, innovative projects. And so we'll sit down with the CEO of Fred Krupp, as an example, of environmental defense, or Francis Beinecke of NRDC, and many others. And they'll say, hey, this is a project that we want to work on. Or we'll Betsy and I will sit them and say, hey, this is something that we think you should be working on. And we'll talk about it. And if there is an opportunity for us to provide seed investment to that project, we'll do that. And we probably do 5 of those a year. And again, if we're successful, then our seed dollars will lead to other organizations, other foundations getting behind that. And we've done that, a stream of that, and I think we've got a good reputation so that when we do this, other foundations will say, all right, well, if Betsy and Jesse are in it, well, then we'll take a look at it as well. The impatience, the problems that they're trying to solve are really, really long problems. And I am impatient, and I think over the years I realized you're just not going to get the result. I thought climate change, I actually thought that there was going to be a bill passed, and like so many other folks in our sector, we really did, and we were almost there, and then it didn't happen. And actually on that note, we all kind of walked away after Copenhagen fell apart and said, now what do we do? For 8 years, this was our defining moment. It was going to happen. And everyone walked away and said, what do we do now? And I think all of us as philanthropists retrenched and said, what do we do? What we did was we kind of went local. We said, you know what, for a moment, let's just stay off of this global change or platform, because I don't think we really made a difference. But we can locally. And so you can really see when you're doing something locally, when you're touching one student or a community in your backyard, or even internationally, and you can see that it made a difference. It can happen. But what I would say is, as an entrepreneur and as investors in philanthropy, we're backing people. So within an organization, we tend to gravitate to the one who's the entrepreneurial one there, and they know it. The large organizations, will put out this person in front of us because they know that we can relate to them, and we'll typically find a project that we can support, and the result of that project will have. So global climate change is a big problem, and who knows how it's ever going to get resolved. But actually figuring out how to do renewable energy in New Haven or in Bridgeport, or doing urban gardens in New Haven and Bridgeport or elsewhere in the world, you can touch it, you can feel it, and you can see the result, and you could get behind a social entrepreneur. Sure. And do whatever you can to make them successful.
Can I follow up, or
Yes.
did you want to?
No, no, please.
I could, just because you mentioned how you having almost been there with the bill and then sort of that disappointment.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to just 3 days ago I learned that I'm able to go to the sustainability conference in Rio,
Oh, great.
the Plus 20.
Great.
And I think there's I think a lot of people are looking to it, especially in light of also COP15.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for this conference? I think there's sort of the cynical view which says, well, the time of big conference is sort of over.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of the hopeful view which says, well, we got a shot at it again, and after all, it's Rio, and it's been now 20 years, so who knows? What is your take on it?
Well, this is where I could actually give you a really political answer that probably I shouldn't. that there has to be a political will. What I found in Copenhagen in the whole process is that the rest of the world still looks to the United States to be a leader.
Oh, I agree. I fully agree.
Right. And so in Copenhagen, we were trying to do that at that point in time, and then we backed off. And so a lot of what was the progress that was made up to that point is going backwards, because it all needs to come together, and it wasn't. So the United States has to figure out again how to lead, and what does that mean, and what shape does that take, different than a large conference. So I'm not sure what will come out of that conference, but I do think, to tie it back to some of the questions on the investment side, if you can get different constituents paying attention to environmental issues in addition to the traditional environmentalists. In the world of philanthropy, I believe 3% of dollars go to environmental issues, right? Or 2 or 3%. It's a very, very small number.
I think we discussed this early on in class.
Right. So, and we probably know where all those dollars are coming from. We're a small group of funders. But if you look at poverty and world health and other issues, they're much bigger. These issues are the same issues. The issues of poverty and water, and when you look at climate change and the things that are happening and will be happening with droughts and floods, and we're seeing it with natural disasters, it really needs to be the intersection, and the environmental community, and they did in Copenhagen, and need to continue to have a much wider tent to realize that it's not about the environment. We live on this earth, and we all live on this earth, and we need to figure out how to coexist in the positive way. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to come out of that, but where I'm optimistic with your generation. I'm optimistic that there's so many younger folks who are figuring out how they want to do things in their own way, and whether they're starting a for-profit company that they want to make money. We talked to someone today that has a software platform for organic farms and for CSAs, so that's a for-profit business. Or social entrepreneurs, folks like 350.org that are running around trying to organize people, and I'm sure there's great groups here at Yale. So I'm optimistic that your generation understands the complexities of what's going on, and will take a leadership role, and our generation will do everything we can to support your efforts. And our philanthropy, a lot of it is going to start up early stage nonprofits that have a different twist on how they want to do things, are collaborating with a larger nonprofit so they get to understand those pieces of it. That's where I think the future is. Certainly things need to happen at a global level, but I think it's going to be a lot of bubbling up, and eventually the leadership, our leadership in Washington, will look behind and realize that folks like you are pushing them forward into the right decisions.